It's JCPenney's Happy Birthday Sale, and the gifts are all yours. Celebrate this Saturday with an in-store coupon giveaway. You could peel and reveal $10, $50, or even $100 off. Don't miss out, but if you do, grab a coupon on the JCPenney app to save an extra 25% all week long. Hurry, party ends Sunday. JCPenney. Coupon giveaway valid 4/15 while supplies last. In-store only. Must be 18 or older. % off coupon valid through 4/16. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.
With your choice of select sandwich, nugs, fries, and a drink, Wendy's $5 Biggie Bag is your go-to. Your nugget wingman. Your hot and crispy fry co-pilot.
Just like us. We're like the bag boys.
What?
Bag boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when we bring your food?
For a deal you can count on, bet on Biggie and choose wisely. Choose Wendy's.
Bag boys.
U.S. price and participation may vary. Includes choice of double-stacked JBC or crispy chicken sandwich with 4-piece nugs, junior fry, and small soft drink. Third-party delivery pricing may be higher.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here back for part 2 of the wide receiver discussion of the prospects coming up in this year's NFL draft. Exciting position, one the Ravens may or may not still have as much interest as they did before the Odell Beckham acquisition. But here to talk about with me is Jake Vogel. Jake, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. How about you?
Real good. Just came back from Grayson Rodriguez's first Baltimore start. And honestly, he looked a lot better than the final line would indicate. He got bashed around. The runners on base all scored when Voth came in the game and gave him up. The Orioles still came back and won 12-8 on a 9 RBI game from Ryan Mountcastle. So exciting night at the ballpark, and appreciate you being a little bit flexible on time to go a little bit later because I was able to pick that up. Let's talk about your number 5 guys. So we'll start there and move on to number 1. I think we discussed in our time off we might have the same 5 guys. Right?
Yes, I believe we do. So my number 5 guy, I really, really like. It makes sense, but Josh Downs, wide receiver, number 11, out of North Carolina, is a very, very nice player. Reminds me a lot of another player we'll get to. He is a phenomenal route runner. He is small, something that people don't talk about quite enough with him, I guess, when you're doing comparisons to some of the really small guys in the class. He's not much bigger than them. If you want to get the measurements, or I could pull them up.
I've got 5'9", 171, 448, 40. He's 22 in August.
Yeah. So not the biggest guy. He definitely knows how to run routes extremely well. He has nice speed, nice acceleration, a good job at creating when there's nothing there. He did that from these swing routes. They put him in the backfield a decent amount, which is an interesting usage of wide receivers. You see that in the NFL occasionally, maybe with like a Deebo Samuel. With the 49ers, there can be a number of other teams that would do that. Perhaps Andy Reid when he had Tyreek Hill with the Chiefs. So they moved him around the formation a good bit. Most of the time he is in the slot. I think that's what he is at the next level. You could use him as a Z receiver as well. He is just small, but a very good route runner. Something else that is a big part of his game are his hands. He has incredible hands. He attacks the ball with extended arms, away from his frame, very plucky hands. And I believe, I'm not looking at the list, but I believe he's one of the best contested catch win rate guys, which is amazing for his size. I hope that he's not in those situations too often at the next level, because I do believe he separates well. So I'm not sure the reasoning for that exactly, but you do see he's able to come down with balls that most people his size could not. He can kind of moss guys, which is, impressive to say the least. I watched his game against Pittsburgh in 2021 and Notre Dame in 2022. I'm sure you're familiar with that game as well. So, yeah, I'm not sure what else I wanted to add real quick. You go ahead and maybe I'll add something else.
It's okay. Yeah, you respond. That'd be terrific. So I had him at number 6, and I do like him a lot. I think the only reason I put my number 5 guy was Jalen Hyatt ahead of him is some of the additional size that I think works better with what the Ravens have, some of the additional verticality. I don't think there's not a problem with Josh Downs running some vertical routes. He has enough speed to do that at 4.48. But what's really special about him is route running and hands. And the hands, you mentioned them, the contested catch rate is one of the very best. He's got an 81% overall catch rate on 116 targets. That does not, I mean, that's up in the Saints receiver, and I'm
Michael Thomas
level. Yeah, I mean it's just absurd in terms of his ability to catch the ball. It won't be that high in the NFL. It can't be, but a 70.1% catch rate in 2021 is probably more realistic and what you'd expect at the next level, and hopefully with a lot of vertical explosiveness. What I really loved about him, and the reason I still kept him high, even though I think he's really a pure slot guy, which does not fit the Ravens. They really need a guy who can be at the Z or be at the X or take the top off the defense in some way where he doesn't have to go in motion all the time with the Ravens' other motion needs and uses. And I'm assuming some of this Roman stuff is going to stay around. Maybe motion and how the Ravens use it completely changes. But unbelievable wiggle at the top of the route. Might be the best in the class. He runs the fairly full route tree, a smaller guy. The DBs are in two ways. They're afraid of him, and they still sometimes bite on the wrong stuff. So usually if they're afraid of him, they want to play off by more as he's coming at them. And then he has a nice, easy completion, either on a slant or a hitch, has lots of opportunities to do that. But even when he's selling something, even when he's slant and go or any time of out and up, whatever you want to call it, he shows an incredible ability to get that defensive back to bite on his first movement. And this is what I've said this about other players at other positions too. It's true at cornerback. It's true at a pass rusher. When you're the extraordinary athlete of the two in a one-on-one competition and pass rush, let's take Adafe Owe as a great example. You really want to put a first move on that opponent, the naked tackle in Owe's case, to make him overreact to that move so you can come up with a secondary move. And then there's also some timing involved in making sure he takes that step off of your route. You can't sell it to him and before he buys it, you make your move. Then you got to time it. But there's still, he's very good at all components of that. And so it's one of the things I really liked about Downs. He had a 9.1 yards per target. That his production, that was on 260 targets from 21 to 22 with 19 TDs. So very productive receiver from that standpoint. What's really held down his yards per target, which is interesting, is that North Carolina has a very extensive wide receiver screen game. I forget exactly how many. He had, I think, 22 screen receptions or something. It was in that neighborhood. And that he only had 4.7 yards per reception on those catches. So you can see that, if you don't have the right blocking scheme or you're going to that well too often, you're probably going to hurt a guy's overall receiving numbers. He's 9.6 yards per target on all other throws. I have yards per target, but I'm not sure if that might be yards per reception. No, it's got to be yards per target. So anyway, the wiggle is something I really love, and I think you want to put him in a position to wiggle. You then want to put him on the outside. And it's not like he can't make people stop and start or whip from the slot. I think he could do that effectively. There might be another team who's going to value him higher there and say, that mid-range speed, we can get more value with his change of direction in the slot and make him valuable there. And, we've talked about other teams that might be willing to do that, including, the traditional New England slot receiver. But I think he could work for the Ravens. And I think, unfortunately, he probably goes between 22 and 86. So if the Ravens don't trade but down from 22, they don't get him.
Yeah, that's spot on. Exactly where I see his value. I think a trade back scenario for Baltimore, he could end up being the best player available if they trade into the 30s. Maybe there's still somebody that they like at a different position that fills a bigger need. but I think he would have really nice value in that 30 to 40 range. I think he's going to be somewhere in there. Yeah. I think he runs whip routes really well. He's just a really nice route running receiver that has plenty of juice. And we're going to get to another guy that has similar juice, maybe a little bit more, but I kind of saw some of the same qualities in Josh Downs. So your number 5 guy. So that was your number 6, right?
Yeah, he was my number 6 guy. My number 5 guy was actually Jalen Hylett, who we talked about in the first show. Haven't listened to that show. Listen to it. It's unbelievably good comments by Jake on a lot of these receivers. Hopefully I add something as well. And we had a little differences in terms of a lot of guys who were not on the top 10 list. So some honorable mention guys who were on the top 10 for one of us. We didn't have anybody who was completely off the list for either of us, right? So all my guys were honorable mentions for you, and et cetera. So anyway, your number 4 guy is next.
Yeah. So my number 4 is the Mr. Potential of this draft. This is the guy that if all of the stars align, he could be the best receiver in this class. However, where he is right now, I have him at 4. That is the big guy in the first round conversations, Quentin Johnston from TCU. He is my number 4. I think he does a lot of things well. I really like his yak ability for being a big man. He is essentially 6'3". Did you have the weight on him?
Yeah, 6'3", 208 at the combine, 9.601 his birthday, so he'll be 22 right around opening day, 449 at his pro day on the 40.
Yeah. So he has nice size, pretty good measurables. He was a pretty high RAS guy, 9.2 at least. I think he can block well at, something that the Ravens do like. He has the ability in the frame to block well on the outside. He can be your true X wide receiver. He has, kind of iffy hands. His hands can be spectacular and they can be disappointing all in the same game. He has that ability to score a touchdown in the red zone at any point. He is a big play receiver. He has the drops, like I mentioned, how his hands can be iffy. Let's see what else we got. I watched his game against Kansas State. I was especially curious with that one because of a prospect, cornerback Julius Brents. I wanted to see how he did against, some legitimate
size.
Size in corner prospect. He was pretty good against Brents. He made a catch for a first down on 3rd and 6 against Brents. Had a nice deep route against Brents for a touchdown. Basically was going against him most of the game. Didn't have a ton of plays, but he had some notable ones in that game. He also played well against Michigan. I think he had a really nice game in the college football playoffs this year against Michigan. He was basically not even a part of the game against Georgia in the national championship game, but the TCU Michigan game was nice for him.
Did he sit out that game?
No, he
was not a part of it.
He was in the game. He just was not involved. I think they kind of took him away. Which was
okay, you're move. Smirking, and I don't think we have a lot of TCU fans in the audience, but one thing we got a very much a laser focused Georgia glasses that Jake's looking through.
Yes, I do think he is a first round talent that has so much potential, but he needs to hone that, and I think the Ravens have the receiving coaches to fix some of his areas of weakness. So they brought in the guy from Kansas City. His name escapes me right now. They still have T. Martin with the quarterbacks coach. I believe Keith Williams is still on the coaching staff. And then you have OBJ in the building. Say what you want about the player, about the contract. I think a veteran like that would help a player like Quentin Johnston develop and kind of embrace the qualities that you want in a big body wide receiver. You want him to turn into a DeAndre Hopkins. I think that's kind of like the upper echelon of what he could become, and it's not what we've seen at the collegiate level.
It's interesting. Now, I had to look it up too. It's Greg Lewis is the wide receivers coach, and Keith Williams is still with the staff. He's now assistant wide receivers coach. Did not know that. All right. More on Johnston before I give you my notes.
You go ahead. I might chime in again. Fair
enough. It really had terrific testing, including his vertical and broad jump, which really just jumped out of the building pretty much at 40.5 on the vertical, 11.2 on the broad. Both those extraordinary, even for a wide receiver and even for a big wide receiver with kind of a basketball background potentially. And I don't know if Quentin Johnston has played any basketball, but if he does have basketball, that would still be good, is my point. In this his case, he has a very good yards per target number in 22 of 11.0. It's 10.8 for the last 3 seasons combined on a non-trivial number of targets, 199 targets with 14 touchdowns during that time. Touchdown rate is good. It's not incredible for 199 targets, but it's certainly very good. But the interesting thing is he really does it with long catches at a lower catch rate. So his career is 57.8% in terms of his career catch rate, which is not great. You'd want to see him do better at the NFL level. One of the problems, as you mentioned, is the contested catch point. He should be more physical, more able to haul in contested catches, though you don't want him to have as many opportunities. They will occur, and he needs a reduction in drops. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. So both things we want. He has good ability after the catch. 19 missed tackles forced and only 60 catches in 2022. So that's a remarkable, it's a high rate. I won't call it a remarkable rate, but it's a high rate. When you get to greater numbers than that, it's usually the running back body types, AJ Brown from a few years ago, who might have more than that. If you put J.K. Dobbins out there, he might generate, or other running backs, they might generate more missed tackles off a screen or something like that at a higher rate. He's often knocked for his lack of physical play. Now, I got to say, this is one of the things I didn't really observe that on tape. And I'm sure, you may be looking at that national championship game, and Georgia's ability to bottle him up might have been a case where he really lacked that physical play, the ability to get off and whatnot. I think I see some of those things, but more importantly, I think given his size and whatnot, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for growth. If you're wondering, you've got a wide receiver who looks all kinds of polished in a lot of other ways, runs a great vertical tree that you like, and you want to try and make him into something more than that. Well, he's got to have some weakness then for you to exploit that in terms of value at the next round. And I think it's the only reason that Quentin Johnston might still be around at 22 is that there are some of these questions surrounding it. So, it was a different set of questions, for example, for David Ojabo last year, but it's that, the opportunity to get him at 45 only existed because of the injury. Otherwise you don't get that opportunity. So I don't honestly think the Ravens are going to sniff him at 22. I think that there's enough love for him and for wide receivers in general that he goes before 22. But it'd be a very difficult question for them if he lasted at 22. Mm-hmm. And could they possibly say no, even with the cornerback need and some other good corners on the board?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, like I mentioned before, he has the most potential, I think, in this class for wide receivers. So he would certainly be hard to pass. Bateman is already in year 3. Mm-hmm. OBJ is only on a 1-year deal. I don't think you're too confident in Tylan Wallace or James Prochet, or even Devin Duvernay is year 4.
And he has to return from an injury. I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions.
So, adding at wide receiver is going to be critical in this draft, whether it happens in the first round or the third round or wherever. They are going to need bodies at the very least, and hopefully some talented ones at that.
Hopefully they scouted this class very deeply. So most of the guys that I looked at, in fact, I'm trying to think of how many guys are even outside the Power Five. So 1, 2, 3, really only 4 guys that I looked at are outside. No, that's not true. I got a couple more down here. Maybe 6 guys I looked at that are outside the Power Five. And the Ravens are really known for finding those small school guys. And I'm not talking about outside the Power Five. I'm talking about FCS guys, or guys who are. Wait, do I have that right? FBS, FCS. I always get that confused.
Yeah,
say it wrong all the time.
FBS is the bigger one. FCS is the smaller conferences.
So if you want the North Dakota State and the South Dakota guys, they're in the in that conference. So anyway, in that group of schools anyway. But anyway, the Quentin Johnson, my number 1 guy, and you had him at number 4. So we'll move on and talk about my number 4 guy, right?
Yeah.
So that's Jackson Smith Njigba of Ohio State. And let me go down to my notes on him and make sure I don't cross up like I usually do. All right, my JSN notes. Okay, so 6'1", 196. Born 2/14/02, which makes him one of the really young receivers in this draft. There are a couple that are maybe as much as 3 or 4 months younger, but he's definitely one of the youngest. Definitely has that big physical profile, 4.48 40. But here's the kicker. 6.57 3-cone for a guy that size is just unheard of. If you have a 6.57 3-cone, it's usually a 5'9" slot corner. We talked I think in the first show about the 667 or 669, whichever it was, by Hutchinson last year as the edge rusher, but it just doesn't really happen for a wide receiver that size. Very unusual. Shuttle was 393. Both of those were the best in the wideout group. So for a lot of reasons, from a physical perspective, he's really the guy you want if you're trying to get the receiver coached up on your team as opposed to dealing with what he has already. There is a concern about him, and this is one voiced by Todd McShay, is that he was really protecting himself through his hamstring injury in his junior season at Ohio State. And that McShay was saying he talked to NFL executives and they all knew exactly what you'd had for breakfast. And I'm slightly paraphrasing here, but they knew he was kind of protecting his draft status by not playing during the season. He was criticized by McShay. McShay took a lot of heat back for it, as you would expect whenever you criticize without giving away your sources in terms of a player not being on the field when he, quote unquote, should have been. He really did benefit from a lot of the overflow at Ohio State of talent in 21. And that what that means is he wasn't getting a lot of decreased value marginal targets. His targets, he was getting nice one-on-one clean opportunities to get free. He wasn't always facing the best cornerbacks, and that obviously changed a lot in his last year here in 22. But Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave will solve a lot of your problems if you're the third receiver in that group. So he let's see, was 14.24 yards per target, 4.01 yards per route run, and an 84.8 catch rate.
Wow.
In 21 when he had those guys with him. And then obviously that dropped off significantly this last year. For whatever reason, I didn't note his yards per target in his last year at Ohio State, but it wasn't nearly as good because he obviously didn't have the protection. Primarily a slot receiver despite his size, and he was still there in 2022 in the kind of the minimal playing time that he had. But anyway, it was a case of I don't think he should be playing in the slot with all he can do for you. He has a lot of things he does well, and he's going to be a guy who, once you teach him the tricks of wiggle at the top of the route, he's going to be that much more dangerous. Right now, he's getting by kind of on what he is physically and his ability to make changes, but it's like kind of like a poker player who only plays his own cards as opposed to trying to read the opponent in terms of what they might have and what they think, you have kind of thing. JSN is a guy who I think is really, gotten by on some of his own physical talent so far, but he is a polished route runner in terms of his ability to get free at the top. and that's positive. Actually, it is JSN who had the toe tap in the back of the end zone, because I got it noted here. It was in the Wisconsin game and was one of the great body control plays of 21. So
Okay.
back of the end zone, it was right foot in. If you want to find the highlight, everybody else had already called it for incomplete. Yak he has is quite good, and it's indicative of good field vision and some elusiveness. He looks, again, as a guy who looks kind of slow relative to defenders. 448, that doesn't have to be. He should be looking about the same speed as other defenders. But honestly, after the catch, like re-accelerating a lot of the times, he looked a little bit slow to me. So I don't think that's necessarily one of his great traits, but maybe somebody who teaches football, teaches catching the ball in stride and securing it is going to be able to coach him up in that area as well. He'd play right away. They might really have a shot at him at 22. I think there's a pretty good chance he's still there. It would take a run on the wide receivers, I think, to make him go. But they really have to be convinced that he's going to play on the outside and that he's going to play that Z and be who they need him to be there, or maybe play the X and be a good backup for both Bateman and OBJ as the Z receiver. But if he has to move to the slot again, I think he has decreased value with the Ravens in terms of how they would use it.
So he's actually my number one guy. I think a lot of the people in kind of the mock draft space consider him to be wide receiver 1, or at least a top 2 receiver in this class. I saw a lot of the same things as you. I think he is a polished route runner, if not the best one in this class, top 2, top 3 for sure. Played primarily out of the slot, like you mentioned. He did. I mean, I have very few notes on plays that he actually had a target and a reception as an outside receiver, but he did have one against Penn State in 2021 as a left wide receiver. He had really nice yak on a curl route, catch and run, gets tackled from behind after a huge gain. A theme of his, when I was watching tape, I saw a player that was similar to J.K. Dobbins in that his long speed is not enough to completely break away from players. He can have really big plays, and he did on tape, but he would get caught from behind if it was a long enough play. Probably, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, he would get caught from behind if it was an extended play with a fast player close by. So yeah, I think he has everything that you need to be a slot for sure, and maybe he can develop into an outside receiver. We just didn't see it a ton at Ohio State. And you mentioned the embarrassment of riches that Ohio State has had at wide receiver, and I think that's true in 2021, but also they still had a ton of guys in 2022. Marvin Harrison Jr., in my opinion, is going to be a top 5, top 6 pick next year, which is amazing. They're just churning out productive, talented players. And the other guy, his name is hard to pronounce. The other guy from Ohio State is also a very nice receiver. He had a good game against Georgia. That's not the end all be all, but he was highly involved against Georgia in the precursor to the national championship, even though it was probably more like the Natty. That was a tough game for sure. But Brian Hartline, former Dolphins receiver, is their wide receiver coach at Ohio State, and he does a phenomenal job coaching up these guys, and I'm sure recruiting talented people in general. I mentioned the speed thing. He does have a number of good end arounds on his tape. He separates well. In the first game, I thought, what is it with this guy? Why is he so highly rated? Because he was running these crossing routes, and there were defenders kind of in his hip pocket. He would catch the ball, but not really get much distance from them and get tackled. And I was like, does he have that speed? Like, does he create after the catch? and then I move to the next game and you see it just like big play after big play. So it's definitely in his tape that he can create monster plays. He can break tackles and shake defenders. So if you're watching one game of his and you're not seeing that ability, just stick with it and, see if it shows up in another one, because I noticed it big time in the Purdue game. Purdue at Ohio State in 2021. He was having a good one.
So let me ask you a question, Jake.
Sure.
You've got a player. He's obviously a difficult evaluation, not necessarily for the skill set, but in terms of where he might go, because he hardly got on the field at all. He had like 5 receptions or whatever in 22,
right.
and only played 3 games. How do you factor for that when you're trying to place him against your other receivers on your own personal big board?
Well, since I'm not part of an NFL team and I don't get all of the true medical information, I just go based on what I hear. So my understanding was that 2022, he was really injured. He did try to play through some injuries and his play was impacted by that. These are things that I've heard on podcasts, big media people doing podcasts and everything in between. So I kind of revert back to his healthy tape and, try to listen to see if he's doing better now. And if his health can return to 100%, then what you're getting in a player is going to be closer to 2021 than 2022, where you can't really evaluate the player. So that's kind of what I did. I looked at his 2021 tape kind of throughout 2022, even though you shouldn't throw it out as an evaluator with the team for the sake of this exercise. I did just more so looking at what he did while he was healthy. Yes, he had talented players around him, but watching his tape, seeing what he did against the competition, that is translatable. I feel like the skills that he possesses are going to translate to the next level. So I just viewed him as a clean prospect, where some of these other guys in the top are clean, but not quite as clean. Like I think he just translates pretty immediately to the NFL.
I think that's fair. I mean, to me, everybody in this entire class has some warts. To me, Quentin Johnston was the closest to not having warts. It sounds like to you've said the same thing about Jackson and Jigba. I just saw it a little bit differently, and I context very important to me. So I probably put a higher weighting on the 21, having the quarterback, having the 3 wide receivers. That was just a juggernaut of an offensive team that Ohio State had, and he was put in a very positive position where he was there.
For sure. So moving on to number 3.
Yep.
All right. So my number 3. Yeah, I know.
So 2 guys it can be.
My number 3 is Zay Flowers out of Boston College.
All right, outstanding. Also, my number 3 for what it's worth, but let's hear what you have to say.
It's not too often that we've had the same exact ranking for these guys.
Yeah.
So phenomenal route runner as well. Maybe not the most polished when you're talking about all of these guys, but a really good route runner, kind of unique in what he does. Definitely knows how to use his physical gifts, his speed, his acceleration, his wiggle. He does all of that really well. I think he can be a difference maker after the catch at the next level. A lot of people, when they're talking about comps for these wide receivers, have brought up, at the high end for Zay Flowers, a name that is brought up, and it's a really high end comparison would be Antonio Brown, the football player, not the person. If you're being compared to that guy, or you think that Zay Flowers can become something similar as a football player, you probably take this guy first out of all of these wide receivers, because there was a multi-year stretch where he was the best wide receiver in the NFL. great separator, big catch, big player. I mean, not a big player, but a big playmaker for sure. Catch and run. He runs those whip routes really well, or a zig. Let's see. Boston College did not have good quarterback play. I was not impressed at all with Moorhead. Don't like that at all, and that always makes it an interesting eval. When you're watching a guy and just wanting to see targets and him get the ball in the quarterback is just so awful. So yeah, I was not impressed by that at all. He does have some drops on tape, and I think that shows up when you look up the numbers for these receivers. The guys that did have to deal with some of the drop issues, that is on his tape. So he's not quite as high for me because he does have, the occasional issues with his hands, but that's correctable. And every receiver is going to drop the ball at certain times. Let's see. He really has built up his frame. He added muscle for the combine, at the.
Get Macy's lowest prices of the season on everything you need for spring. Like 50 to 60% off suits, blazers, and pants from his favorite designers. Buy more, save more during the great shoe sale. Get 40% off 2 or more pairs, 30% off 1 pair. And get 30 to 70% off fine jewelry during our diamond sale. Plus, download the free Macy's app today for even more lowest prices of the season. Savings off sale and clearance prices, exclusions apply.
With your choice of select sandwich, nugs, fries, and a drink, Wendy's $5 Biggie Bag is your go-to. Your nugget wingman. Your hot and crispy fry co-pilot.
Just like us. We're like the bag boys.
What?
Bag boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when we bring your food?
For a deal you can count on, bet on Biggie and choose wisely. Choose Wendy's.
Bag boys.
U.S. price and participation may vary. Includes choice of double-stacked JBC or crispy chicken sandwich with 4-piece nugs, junior fry, and small soft drink. Third-party delivery pricing may be higher.
It's JCPenney's Happy Birthday Sale, and the gifts are all yours. Celebrate this Saturday with an in-store coupon giveaway. You could peel and reveal $10, $50, or even $100 off. Don't miss out, but if you do, grab a coupon on the JCPenney app to save an extra 25% all week long. Hurry, party ends Sunday. JCPenney. Coupon giveaway valid 4/15 while supplies last. In-store only. Must be 18 or older. % off coupon valid through 4/16. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.
Weigh-ins, but I think he's still going to deal with some issues at the next level in terms of bigger physical corners getting hands on him. He has the frame that's kind of running back-esque, which is good. You love to see that in a wide receiver. That usually means that they're going to be better players after the catch, can break some more tackles and maybe shake some defenders. You do see that, but there are occasions on tape where he can get, knocked a little bit from a corner due to like a press coverage, or maybe it's even something downfield that maybe would be considered illegal but wasn't called. So you just want to see a little bit more physicality at times from him. Notre Dame, by the way, I watched the Notre Dame game, and there were some guys that stood out. I'm sure you know them quite well. Number 20, Benjamin Morrison, the freshman, had 3 interceptions against Boston College in 2022. A phenomenal game. He had 2 interceptions in the first quarter. This is, I don't mean to get off the rails, but somebody to look forward to down the road. And I also liked Boston College's running back. He's a freshman as well. But, yeah, there was a tale of two tapes. I watched Boston College, Clemson, 2021. He was very minimally involved. I had 2 plays where he was targeted. One of them, interception. Second one, it was, in between. He fought really hard to come back to the ball on an extended play. The quarterback was pressured, but he couldn't haul in the pass. And then he was overthrown twice. It was just bad quarterback play in 2021. And then Clemson in 2022 was a different story. He had great extended plays, uncovering to catch the ball inbounds, and create yards after the catch. He did a great job getting open on a deep slant. He had a drop on a drag route. You don't like to see those short targets where you're just dropping the ball, probably a little bit off target, but you need to haul those in. And he is good with the screen receptions as well. But I had watched 3 games on him, and he was really good in 2 of them, and then kind of not involved in the other.
Tons to unpack on this guy. The screen receptions, he had 27 screen catches for 115 yards. So that was one of the things that's really held down his overall production, which was kind of a problem for him. His catch rate of 62.9% is not good. And I think you can blame some of that, as you really have in your discussions here, on the quarterback. The 8.7 yards per target also is not what you want out of a prospect at this point on anybody's board. As being a guy who you want a guy who's closer to 10 yards a target, a deep threat. You probably want to see a fair number of deep catches there. He had barbelled throws. So what I mean by that is he had a lot of longs and a lot of shorts, and his long catches were near the top of the group, but so were his number of screen catches. He had 12 deep catches, which was tied for 16th among all the receivers. But he also had 27 screen catches, which was tied for 19th among all the receivers. And that's a receiver group that's hundreds. So, it's not a small group at all. So it's really a barbelled number of catches that were at both ends. I have a little bit different view of his route running. I think it's very much a work in progress. I think his wiggle is not exceptional right now. But I think that's an enormous opportunity for improvement. So you already have a productive receiver here, who I think is, produced under some difficult circumstances, as you would probably say at Boston College. Unlike, looking at JSN and some of the tape he's got that's any good is in 21, and it's under the most positive possible circumstances of all. So I that's what I liked about Flowers. I think the lack of route running shows up in that he was much more effective versus zone than man. You'd want to change that. You'd want to have him be a guy who sells a fake very well at the top of the route. And I think he could be that guy. Losing people in a whip route, you're mostly doing that with your own ability. You're not watching the feet of the opponent necessarily. Okay. Flowers could be a guy, I think, who could sell the move, time his move off that sales job, to be a very effective change of direction player who will create immediate, significant separation, more than he does so far. He really isn't a box out guy, obviously, at his size, but he is pretty decent at the catch point, has been his career. Definitely a guy who gives you all kinds of gadget potential. He could be your orbit motion guy. He can be your guy coming through the backfield in motion who takes the forward passes that Marquise Brown used to take, what do you call it, shovel passes that Marquise Brown used to take, that really are run plays, an extension of the run game on an end around, but they're passes. His speed is near the top of the wide receiver class, 442. Certainly it's a very tight pack this year. There aren't any 423 or 427 guys. There's no John Ross out there who's going to disappoint you at the next level despite great speed. So you don't really have that one guy who's such an incredible standout. You have a lot of guys who are tightly grouped. What I saw in Flowers' game also I liked was a lot of coming back for the football and then being able to make a move off that to make people miss. And that ended up being some decent yak. Marquise Brown had that as a characteristic in his game, never became a really great yak player. In part, he was kind of dealing with some injuries, was a guy who went down to the turf more often and quicker than most of the bigger receivers, tight ends, whatnot, that we've seen the Ravens have in recent years. And, that would go to small steps and really fighting for every additional fraction of a yard. But Zay Flowers is a guy who will try and make a big play. He's the guy you're immediately pissed because he goes back 4 yards on a punt return to try and make a big play, and you no, yes, kind of thing, and he all of a sudden gets free. So punt return background in his case, he has absolutely no fear of punt return rules from what I saw. He fielded one punt versus Rutgers at the 2-yard line, returned it 38 yards, but then there was a flag on the play for roughing the kicker. Didn't have anything to do with the return. So it wasn't a holding or a block in the back or something, but they'd already roughed the kicker and it got all pulled back. To field a punt at the 2-yard line, Madden used to say always that his rule with Oakland was if you were inside the 8-yard line, it was an automatically you can wait for the fair catch, but you get away from the football and allow it to try and bounce into the end zone. That's where his risk return kind of went to nothing. Anybody who's willing to receive a punt at that point will hear it from their coach about what just happened. So that was an interesting thing. They're famously, in a game a few years ago, I'm trying to remember who the guy was. It might have been Jermaine Lewis, who returned a punt out of the end zone. And it was just one of the really strange things. But other guys in Ravens history, Benny Thompson once picked up one that was like rolling dead and everybody kind of just walking off the field. He just picked it up while it was still moving and ran for about 40 yards in return. But it's really unusual to field a punt in the end zone and try and make a return out of that. And that's one of the things. Is definitely a moxie play from Flowers. Definitely needs to use the fact, like we mentioned with one other player earlier, that he's a much better athlete than the guy opposite him to sell a move, understand that he sold it, make his move off that move and make it be well-timed to get the maximum possible separation. And he's playing very well. He's a productive receiver doing what he's doing. But if you're looking for where's the new plus coming out of his game at the NFL level, or how's he going to not lose from his college game, maybe another better way to put it is by becoming a better salesman at the top of the route, in my opinion. So Zay Flowers, my number 3 guy also.
Good.
I think we got the same number 2 guy because we both eliminated our number 1s on number 4.
That's true. I will say the other thing that's odd, I believe I don't have any touchdowns from him in the games that I watched, which is, a 3-game sample size. You'd like to see some scoring. But that's okay. He has
his touchdowns career 29 as a receiver, 2 as a rusher, and those are from scrimmage. And he did not have a punt return touchdown. He just had a few minimal punt returns, honestly. But definitely, if you missed a touchdown, you did a pretty good job. He's played a lot of college games. Played 48 college games in 4 seasons. Not too many people in the receiving class have that kind of experience. And 29 touchdowns. So it's definitely been productive.
Absolutely. Next up is our last guy. I believe he's going to be there. Number 2, Jordan Addison from USC. He also played at Pittsburgh. He is a route running clinic, that he puts on a clinic at least. I think he has some of the most versatility in the class to be inside, outside. Definitely can be an outside receiver, also a slot guy. Fits, a Ravens need, in my opinion. He's a smaller frame, which you don't love, especially his weight is, uncharacteristically low for his length. But yeah, let's get into a little bit more of who he is as a player. Really good at in-breaking routes. Decent on some screens. He has some yards after the catch, run after catch skills. But he's not going to win too many contested catch opportunities at the next level with his frame. Weight and mass, in my opinion. I think where he's primarily going to win is the separation that he creates from his route running. And that's a good thing. You don't really want to have contested catches. You just want a guy to be open, and he does that extremely well. He's not going to be a very good blocker for you either. A lot of Ravens fans are tired of hearing, we want wide receivers that can block. They really just want to see a receiver catch the ball and do what receivers primarily do. But in today's NFL, you want guys that that can help the players around them when there's a play happening, a big play, and Jordan Addison can develop into that. But from what I've seen, he's not the best blocker down the field. Let's see. Yeah, he's a good post route kind of guy. Nice. Like I mentioned, those crossing routes from the outside or from the slot are going to be some of his bread and butter. The only issue with over the middle is you're going to get more contact. And with that size, you just don't want to see injuries occur because of his frame. He also can be a big winner on corner routes. So that's outbreaking. Don't have to worry about that. And I think he can sell vertically. He has enough speed. He did not test as well as people hoped, especially with that weight concern. I think he was 4.49.
That's right.
But that's all the speed you need. Most of the top receivers in the game, outside of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, aren't really speed merchants. They're more in that 4.4, 4.5 kind of range, somewhere in there. So he fits that mold. He also is similar to what you mentioned with Rashad Bateman, kind of that middle level size receiver that can run the full route tree. I think that's what you see with Jordan Addison as well. Let's see, anything else that he has very nice hands, plucky hands. I mentioned that about a couple players, but definitely Josh Downs. I think you see some of that with Jordan Addison as well. And he does win deep. He does win deep for his speed. He wins down the field. Especially when he can stack corners and really get on top of them with his separation.
Lots to say. Great stuff. Won the Blentnikoff in 2021. So that he had a fantastic year, 25 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. Here's the big thing. He was over 11 yards per target on each of the last 2 seasons, and he's 11.07 over the combination of the 2 seasons. It doesn't get any more consistent than that. And to put that in the frame that people can understand, because I know yards per target are not what do you mean? Why not yards per reception? Well, yards per target is your catch rate, is percentage of catches you get times the yards per reception you get. And it's the most important statistic, as I'll say again, for a wide receiver. Mark Andrews is the Ravens record holder ever for a single season with 11.04 in his rookie year. That kind of number is very hard to maintain once you become the guy for a team, because you tend to get a lot of other schemed production to get important first downs. They trust your hands on a little flat route to get open. They trust your hand on slants to get open. They'll do some wide receiver screens to you. All kinds of things, may come up that will actually cut into your productivity when you're not running deep as much. But anyway, yards per target is still the most important characteristic by far, and Addison has it in spades. His targets were cut in half in 22. That was with 3 fewer games played and a lot more on the outside. So he played a lot more slot in 21, where he's was a lot more targets for the same basic production per target. And so when he moved more to the outside, I think it would be fair to say that he lost some productivity out of that. Some of that could also be blamed on scheme and the quarterback and whatnot, but we're going to stick with Addison taking responsibility for it himself, because he was the Blentnikoff guy in 21. What he has that just is above most of the other players in the class is the wiggle at the top of the route that is really special, and it's the killer combination of route salesmanship with running the entire route tree. So let's take this for example. If you're a vertical receiver primarily, you better have one other thing, dig, hitch, something else that is the go-to route for when you sell deep and you want to come back on the football for a 10-yard gain. You better have that in your toolkit. Derek Mason, if you look back at him, the reason he could still get on top of a cornerback occasionally was the fact that he had a great hitch thing, and Flacco had a Nolan Ryan type arm, getting the ball to the outside, not always super accurate, which is also Ryan-esque, but getting the ball to the outside where the cornerback did not have a chance to play it on the back shoulder. And because he could sell that hitch, he could still occasionally get deep when he needed to. Well, Addison, because he runs the whole route tree, and Bateman to a similar degree, are very gifted route runners because they can sell something at the top of the route. Addison would be a great addition in that regard. I think he's a guy you probably could put at Z. You want to keep him on the outside to take full advantage of the wiggle and the full route. I don't think he's going to be best served playing in the slot, even though his college production has been better in the slot than it was on the outside. So I'm excited about Addison as a possibility. He's my number 2 guy overall as well. The knocks on him are exactly the knocks that are on a lot of the other receivers in this class. At 5'11", 173, it's kind of an elfin build. You don't want that in a receiver if you can possibly avoid it. Struggles to work through that contact occasionally at the line of scrimmage. So press coverage in the NFL, where it's more of a factor, will be one problem. The other problem that will come up a lot, and it really will be cornerbacks of any size who will probably give him trouble on this, is if he's running a vertical route down the sideline, whether left or right, that he'll get pushed towards the sideline as bigger NFL corners are wont to do. Jimmy Smith, like Taylor, all those guys would give him a lot of trouble at the NFL level. So, you're in this catch-22 of the slot takes away some of his wiggle value, but it might be the best place for him in terms of productivity. It won't be the place the Ravens want him. The Ravens will want him on the outside where he can help them more, or they'll want him maybe on third down and other 11 personnel settings where they can move him to the inside as well. So we act like we know, or I'm acting, maybe I won't throw it on you, exactly what Monken's offense will look like. And I still think they're going to want to use their tight ends because they have 3 good ones. But, if they got to a point where they drafted a good wide receiver and all of a sudden all their guys, including Beckham, were producing because of it, I think Monken's going to be fairly agnostic to using 11 or 12 or perhaps even 21 personnel in terms of getting the most value he can out of these. I just think we are probably in a situation where receivers are not going to be completely happy in this offense still, because there aren't enough total touches to go around because of A, the run game, B, the fact that Lamar has a lot of check down touches himself in the form of scrambles, and C, the fact that Lamar and the Ravens tend to shorten football games with a lot of running of the football. So, they're a high points per drive offense, and they have been when they've been successful, but wide receivers kind of want, give me more plays per drive in total and more plays in an entire game because I want more, receptions. And you can't blame them. They all get paid on that basis, but hopefully Addison is a guy who could still be productive with the way Monken is going to optimize this offense.
Absolutely. And I think Todd would be happy to have a first round wide receiver added, and have that 11 personnel option right out the gate. Yes, right now, tight end is a strength of the team. I don't think that's going anywhere. But I do think you can, move between 11 and 12 personnel pretty seamlessly. You obviously have to huddle and, sub guys in and out to do that. But if you have a guy that can play outside and inside, that to pair with Odell and Bateman, especially early in the season when hopefully everyone's healthy, that's a good situation to be in. And then the other thing is, you don't draft a guy just because you think this is a great package for 11 personnel. You draft a guy because injuries happen at the position.
Sure.
No matter what you try to do and prepare for that. So if Bateman goes down again this year, if Odell goes down like he has, you want to have another legitimate option and weapon for Lamar at the wide receiver position to take some of that threat away from Mark Andrews, or take some of that attention away from him to make everybody else better.
That's just a fantastic point, Jake. And anybody who looks at the draft as kind of a point in time thing is really failing one of the major tests. And all we have to do is look back to last year's draft in the first round. What happened? Who did the Ravens draft? They drafted a safety. They don't need a safety. They've got all these safeties. What about Chuck Clark? What about, we just signed Marcus Williams. Why would we need another safety? Geno Stone looks pretty good. And Tony Jefferson's on the roster. Well, we saw a box the season went on exactly why they needed Kyle Hamilton, because he's one hell of a football player. And, Jordan Addison, I'm confident he's going to be a good NFL player at kind of the minimum. It'd just be a question of whether or not I think he's available even at 22. What would you put as the percentage of chance that Addison is still available at 22?
I would say maybe 47% likelihood.
Okay. So you're just under 50. I think that's probably pretty reasonable. It could be a year, certainly, where the first receiver isn't taken till a little later. I personally think Quentin Jefferson will go off the board because he kind of checks a lot of the boxes, and there's always people who think they can move him up. I think if you're talking about a receiver like Addison, you've got other choices in the draft. You might like Marvin Mims more. You might like somebody else who's younger, say. And Addison is actually one of the younger guys in the draft. He's going to be 21 and a half. He won't be 22 till after this season is complete, which is really good. But you might pick another receiver who's a big body instead of him. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. So your number one guy, you would really like to see JSN be the guy the Ravens go after?
Absolutely. I really like the top 5 guys, top 6 guys. If any of those guys land on Baltimore's roster, I'm going to be really happy. And I think, I would end up being happy with another guy in our top 10 or just out of the top 10 later in the draft as well. It's just those top 5, top 6 guys for me move the needle in a way that some of those other players maybe can't right away.
So one thing I forgot to do is go through our honorable mentions, because we have a few of those, and we probably have some non-overlapping ones. But what we'll do is we'll just name one each, and I'm not going to try and react to yours, but just a sentence or two on these guys and what you think they might bring to the Ravens offense. Do you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
You go ahead. Okay,
so my first guy is Rashee Rice of SMU. A little bit bigger body at 6'1", 204. He had okay contested catch rate, but some drop problems. 18 deep catches, led all receivers in 22. So he was also 5th in screen catches. So we had another player that was like that. 35 screen catches for 203 yards. So 5.8 yards per reception on those really cut into his overall yards per target, which was just 8.6, which is okay for a draftable receiver. But anyway, Rashee Rice is on my list of potential guys.
Absolutely. He is on my list as well. I really liked him as a prospect. He just missed the cut for me. My guy, A.T. Perry from Wake Forest. I know he's kind of up and down. He was not the best contested catch receiver, especially for his size. But if you go back to his 2021 tape, I think you might be a little bit more impressed than what you saw in 2022. I'm not 100% sure the reasoning for his decline, in my opinion. But he looked really nice against Clemson. You saw some plays against Andrew Booth. He got the better of him. And then also Booth is a really good player who kind of put some straps on him as well in that game. But I like his, he has that X receiver to him. Like, that's what he is. He lined up pretty much exclusively as left wide receiver without the tight end over there. So he was, lining up as the X. He had nice catches on in routes, deep curls, over the middle. Some vertical stuff, but mainly like to threaten vertically, and then they threw a lot of curl routes. He was able to create some yards after the catch, which is nice to see in a frame that large. He was on the list for me.
Couple comments about Perry before we move on. We need to keep it to less total commentary than the normal, but certainly has the size. He's been 24 in October, which I didn't like. His catch rate has improved a little bit each season, but it was still only 62.8% in 22. Very physical guy, and 26 touchdowns the last 2 years with 9.4 yards per target is certainly in the range where he's good. you mentioned the contested catch rate. We don't need to go there. I think he's a project selection. I think he'd be a day 3 guy for the Ravens. 5th round, maybe you get him in the 4th. I think he was 14th overall for me. So he did make my honorable mention list, but he wasn't at the top of it. I'll mention one guy, Cedric Tillman. We already talked about earlier as being, he was on your top 10. He's on my project list. Tyler Scott of Cincinnati. The reason I love him is strictly a speed merchant and a guy who I think if they need a cheap, take the lid off guy, he'd be good. Now he had a 4:44.40 he ran either at Pro Day or at the Combine, but there's a claim of a 4:29.40 he's ran previously. Now I've heard a claim of a 4:34.40 for Lamar. I don't really believe Lamar is that fast. I think Lamar is major thing is that he's just able to make other people miss because he reads leverage so well. Right. And honestly, when you see Lamar run, he almost never gets out of third gear. When he's running in third gear, that's his Maserati movement speed. Whereas anybody else running in third gear is, they completely overrun a play or they can't stop.
Right.
But he can do what he needs to. So anyway, Tyler Scott is my cheap speed merchant.
I like that one a lot. I need to still watch some of the guys in this class, and he's at the top of the list of who I need to watch. Michael Wilson, I didn't love what I saw from him, but he is in my honorable mentions. He's a guy that couldn't make the top 10 for me at all because of injury.
Yes.
Just an incredible amount of bad injury luck or injury prone type situation for him. He just has not been on the field in any of the past 3 years consistently. But he does have some qualities that are really nice. And I know some people that have him in their top 10 wide receivers. So I felt like I needed to mention him here because he has some of the abilities that you look for in a day 2, day 3 wide receiver.
Okay, he's on my no list, and it's the injuries that are the concern. Yeah. I don't know how to draft a guy like that. What he'll do is he'll be a black dot on the Ravens board for an injury or off-field issue, and if he drops far enough, they might still take him. They did with Arthur Jones in 2010. They had him black dotted, so I think it's possible. So it's it wouldn't be a guy I'd take anyway on the first 2 days. Yeah, if he drops to around 5, is your trigger finger getting itchy with him? It depends on who else is there. I got some other no's on the list. I'll drop those right off the bat. I know a lot of people like this guy, but Andre Yasivich is a guy out of Princeton that I do not like. He's out by age, unproven competition. Somebody's going to get a good value out of him at either a UDFA, a 6 or a 7, and they're going to really like what they have potentially, or they're going to really not like it, but they're not going to have a big gamble involved either way.
Yeah, for sure. I have not watched him yet either, but I know he showed up kind of in a big way at the Senior Bowl on some more people's radar. Because how many folks do you know that are watching the Ivy League schools? Not that many. So yeah, he's an interesting one. Marvin Mims was on my honorable mention. We already talked about him. Another guy for me would be Parker Washington out of Penn State. I think he has some really nice hands. One of the better contested catch players in this class, if I remember correctly. Smaller frame as well. Maybe he's like 5'11", 5'10", 5'11", something like that. Good slot option for the Ravens, even though it's not necessarily something they need. I think he can play some Z as well. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you for catching that. Wouldn't be an episode of Film Study without an accidental muting. Yeah, I have him outside of my honorable mention. 5'10", 204. He is one of the younger receivers in the draft, and he's definitely a running back type build that'll give you yak. Had a 9.4 YPT for Penn State, so that's not a super easy environment to get a ton of yak necessarily, or a good yards per target period. Has really enormous hands, but he's just outside of my honorable mention. He's one of the guys I looked at and I said I can't include him, but he's not a no. He is a guy that if he dropped far enough, if he's a day 3, you might take a shot at him. Mm-hmm. I'll just mention one other. I can't believe there's 2 other guys actually. I can't believe we haven't discussed. One is Raheem Jarrett of Maryland. Raheem Jarrett, right? That I think it would be a very popular pick, first of all, if he came. And I think there are receiving elements that make him a very viable day 3 pick for somebody, certainly. There probably is somebody saying they could see him going in the 3rd round. I think that's a pretty pro Maryland viewpoint to have on the matter, but he certainly gives you something. Another one is Xavier Hutchinson of Iowa State. The thing I didn't like about Hutchinson, and I'm sorry to do 2 at once here like this, but he was a guy whose production really dropped off after Charlie Kolar left. And Charlie Kolar, they fed the offense through him. Hutchinson became that guy in 2022 and had a very high target number, and his yards per target dropped way off from 9.5 to 7.3, which is, a function of being the guy. He had 15 missed tackles in 107 receptions. For a guy who's 6'2", 203, and he's getting that many receptions, that's not an acceptable missed tackle rate. So, we see the really good guys are up at 1 every 3 receptions, and he's at 1 every 7 and change. Just not what you want, and especially out of a big guy. So he was a guy I ruled out for that. He's not a no, but he's not on the he'd be 16th among all my wide receivers.
Gotcha. Yeah, he was somebody that I was about to get to that I didn't get to. Xavier Hutchinson for sure.
All right. Anybody else you want to talk about before we call it here?
No, I'm good.
All right. Outstanding, my friend. This is just great stuff going through this. Really appreciate all the prep you've done clearly for this, your knowledge of SEC football, and obviously that's crisscrossed all over these receivers who, a disproportionate number come from that conference, of course. Sure. But tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Real Jake Vogel, VOGEL, and I'm always happy to talk Ravens football, Georgia football, SEC football, college, and NFL in general. So if you see me on your timeline and want to chat, comment, quote, tweet me. I sometimes am in Twitter spaces, and those are fun to actually have dialogue with people. So definitely hit me up and we can have a conversation.
Sounds good, my friend. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open. Come up with your own topic. You can also do a That One Play if you want to do that. Anyway, I'll get right back to you, and we'll be recording quickly. Jake, thanks again for coming on, all the prep for this.
Thank you so much, Ken. I appreciate it.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.
With your choice of select sandwich, nugs, fries, and a drink, Wendy's $5 Biggie Bag is your go-to. Your nugget wingman. Your hot and crispy fry co-pilot.
Just like us. We're like the bag boys.
What?
Bag boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when we bring your food?
For a deal you can count on, bet on Biggie and choose wisely. Choose Wendy's.
Bag boys.
U.S. price and participation may vary. Includes choice of double-stacked JBC or crispy chicken sandwich with 4-piece nugs, junior fry, and small soft drink. Third-party delivery pricing may be higher.
It's JCPenney's Happy Birthday Sale, and the gifts are all yours. Celebrate this Saturday with an in-store coupon giveaway. You could peel and reveal $10, $50, or even $100 off. Don't miss out, but if you do, grab a coupon on the JCPenney app to save an extra 25% all week long. Hurry, party ends Sunday. JCPenney. Coupon giveaway valid 4/15 while supplies last. In-store only. Must be 18 or older. % off coupon valid through 4/16. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.